Greetings, friends. Welcome to another episode of the Merry Corncrakes. My name is Nathan Hood, and I will be your host for this deep dive into some of the works of Edgar Allan Poe. The motivation for this was really it started when I watched a Hammer horror film. Some of you might know Hammer horror. It's a classic British film kind of franchise would be the wrong word, but it was starred figures like Christopher Lee, Peter Cushing. There was just tons and tons of these movies, and they always had a kind of mysterious and dark and twisted aspect to them. And one of these films, the premise of the film, if I remember it correctly, was that there was a group of people who had gone into a kind of haunted house in a fairground, and the man, Mr. Diablo, who was running this haunted house, he invited them to kind of behold this woman who would who had a piece of string, and with her shear would cut it. So and this of course is drawing on the ancient ideas of the fates of the Norns in Norse mythology, and they would be weaving the thread of life, and then eventually it would be cut short, and that would be when the death comes. And so each of these people would, see this mechanical animatronic about to do this, and then they would have a vision of something in their lives. And one of these figures, he is a rather strange fellow who is obsessed with the works of Edgar Allan Poe. He goes to visit a man who owns many of the great rare works, rare texts by Poe, manuscripts and so on. And this, of course, is a character being played by Peter Cushing. It transpires that Peter Cushing is a representative of Poe, that Edgar Allan Poe is still alive, that he had been bound by Satan to carry on writing. And somehow Poe manages to trick our character into taking his place so that Poe can escape to the afterlife, and this fellow carries on in his place. Indeed, I think Poe helps burn. This guy helps burn Poe alive. It's a rather strange film, but it made me very interested in reading some Edgar Allan Poe because I've heard his name quite often. He is one of the great American writers of the 19th century, if not of all time. And yet, in my own education, being brought up in Britain, he never really was put forward to us in school, and he wasn't someone that I'd ever had the opportunity to read before. And one of the things that I really appreciated about Poe when I was thinking about reading his stuff was that a lot of it is short, and he was a big believer in making stories and poetry readable within one sitting. And as I'm very busy these days, this was very appealing to me. So I started to do this, and the more I read of Poe, the more I'm just enthralled, and I want to keep reading more and more and more and more of Edgar Allan Poe. And so in this month's Corncrake, I have a little bit on Edgar Allan Poe. I'm just going to raise my seat a little bit. Sorry for that, chaps. I'll show you. This is this month's Corncrake magazine, which you can get on at corncrakemag.com. It is out one day early for all us special people watching the stream. So we are very lucky today that we can get our hands on Edgar Allan Poe already from here. And I think it's a beautiful front cover that we've got going on here. It is very pretty. And we stroll down. The Merry Corncrakes podcast. That does look a little bit like me, or my spirit animal. Indeed, I've been told that I am quite like Molly from Wind in the Willows. I've been binge watching the Wind in the Willows ITV series in the last week or so, and it's been great. It's so wholesome and pure. Such a contrast between reading Edgar Allan Poe and watching the Wind in the Willows. But I've been told I'm quite like Molly. A kind, gentle creature who has courage and heart and loyalty. Sounds maybe I'd be interested in your thoughts, chaps. But you can see there's a lot of good things in here that we are going to go straight through, down the way we go, past all the important dates. Of course, October the 29th is Robin Hood Day. It's the official Robin Hood Day, so we all need to celebrate that in some way or another. And then we move down through. We've got some Philip Vortman, a returning friend to the Corncrake. Poems of George Herbert. I mean, some of these Agony. This sounds like an Edgar Allan Poe sort of poem already. Got some more A.R. Green here. He's been working on his sequence of stories over the last few issues, so you can always catch them up. Intellectual Freaks. I read this in preparation for the Corncrake. It's a bit different, but I'd recommend it. It's a good story. It's how did the editor describe it? It's a departure from what she normally gets, which is Vikings smashing things up, from most of her contributors, which is a fair way to put it. Then we've got A.R. Duncan Eagle's Flight again. We've got some beautiful artwork here. Lots of Highland cows, cute Highland cows. And a little bit further, oh yes, there's an exhibition going on by a friend of ours, Rob Floyd. He is doing some great art at Manchester Cathedral. Go and check it out now, if you're in Manchester. This is St. Francis. Got St. Cuthbert and St. Kieran, John the Baptist, St. Melangel. So lots of interesting paintings by him. Good quality. We head down. Here we go. So what I'm planning to do in this stream is I'm going to read first The Raven, which is arguably Poe's most well-known poem. After that, I'm going to read my foreword to the two texts that I've included in this, because I think it gives a good summary of his basic ideas in the second text, which is the how to compose stories, and we can expand upon it as well. And then I might, if there's time, read another short story that I came across recently, which I was so enthralled by that I want to kind of share it with you guys. So, and the version we're actually going to read today of the text, The Raven, we're actually going to pick something that I found, and we couldn't include all the illustrations in this month's Corncrake, so I want to share you this instead. This is a version of the Raven that was made into a book, and it contains illustrations by Gustave Doré, who did lots of similar works during this period. Very beautiful engravings. As you can see, this is the front cover that he produced. And so in each kind of stanza, there is a certain image. So you can see here's the image for Once Upon a Midnight Dreary. Oh, it's forbidden apparently. So let us read The Raven. Once upon a midnight dreary, while I pondered, weak and weary, over many a quaint and curious volume of forgotten lore, while I nodded, nearly napping, suddenly there came a tapping, as of some old gently rapping at my chamber door. "'Tis some visitor," I muttered, tapping at my chamber door. Only this, and nothing more. Ah, distinctly I remember it was in the bleak December, and each separate dying ember wrought its ghost upon the floor. Eagerly I wished the morrow, vainly I had sought to borrow from my books a crease of sorrow, sorrow for the lost Lenore, for the rare and radiant maiden, whom the angels name Lenore, nameless here for evermore. And the silken, sad, uncertain rustling of each purple curtain thrilled me, filled me with fantastic terrors never felt before, so that now, to still the beating of my heart, I stood repeating, "'Tis some visitor entreating entrance at my chamber door, some late visitor entreating entrance at my chamber door. This it is, and nothing more." Presently my soul grew stronger, hesitating then no longer. "Sir," said I, "or madam, truly your forgiveness I implore. But the fact is I was napping, and so gently you came rapping, and so faintly you came tapping, tapping at my chamber door, that I scarce was sure I heard you. Here I open wide the door. Darkness there, and nothing more." Deep into that darkness peering, long I stood there wondering, fearing, doubting, dreaming dreams no mortal ever dared to dream before. But the silence was unbroken, and the darkness gave no token, and the only word there spoken was the whispered word, "Lenore." This I whispered, and an echo murmured back the word, "Lenore." Merely this, and nothing more. Back into the chamber turning, all my soul within me burning, soon again I heard a tapping somewhat louder than before. "Surely," said I, "surely that is something at my window lattice. Let me see then what thereat is, and this mystery explore. Let my heart be still a moment, and this mystery explore. 'Tis the wind, and nothing more." Open here I flung the shutter, when, with many a flirt and flutter, in there stepped a stately raven of the saintly days of yore. Not the least obeisance made he, not a minute stopped or stayed he, but, with mien of lord or lady, perched above my chamber door, perched upon a bust of ballast, just above my chamber door, perched and sat, and nothing more. Then this ebony bird, beguiling my sad fancy into smiling, by the grave and stern decorum of the countenance it wore, "Though thy crest be shorn and shaven, though I said art sure no craven, ghastly grim and ancient raven wandering from the nightly shore, tell me what thy lordly name is on the night's Plutonian shore." Quoth the raven, "Nevermore." Much I marvelled this ungainly fowl to hear discourse so plainly, though its answer little meaning, little relevancy bore. For we cannot help agreeing that no living human being ever yet was blessed with seeing bird above his chamber door, bird or beast above the sculptured bust above his chamber door, with such name as Nevermore. But the raven, sitting lonely on the placid bust, spoke only that one word, as if his soul in that one word he did outpour. Nothing further then he uttered, not a feather then he fluttered, till I scarcely more than muttered, "Other friends have flown before. On the morrow will he leave me, as my hopes have flown before." Then the bird said, "Nevermore." Startled at the stillness broke by reply so aptly spoken, "Doubtless," said I, "what it utters is its only stock and store, caught from some unhappy master, whom unmerciful disaster followed fast and followed faster, till his songs one burden bore, till the dirges of his hope that melancholy burden bore, of never, nevermore." But the raven still beguiling all my sad soul into smiling, straight I wheeled a cushioned seat in front of bird and bust and door. Then upon the velvet sinking, I betook myself to linking fancy unto fancy, thinking what this ominous bird of yore, what this grim, ungainly, gaunt, and ominous bird of yore meant in croaking "Nevermore." This I sat engaged in guessing, but no syllable expressing to the fowl whose fiery eyes now burned into my bosom's core. This and more I sat divining, with my head at ease reclining on the cushion's velvet lining that the lamplight gloated o'er, but whose violet lining with the lamplight gloating o'er she shall press, ah, nevermore. Then, methought, the air grew denser, perfumed from an unseen censer, swung by seraphim whose footfalls tinkled on the tufted floor. Wretch, I cried, thy God hath lent thee, by these angels he has sent thee, respite, respite and nepenthe from thy memories of Lenore. Quaff, O quaff this kind nepenthe, and forget this lost Lenore. Quoth the raven, nevermore. Prophet, said I, thing of evil, prophet still, if bird or devil, whether tempter sent, or whether tempest tossed thee here ashore, desolate yet all undaunted, on this desert land enchanted, on this home by horror haunted, tell me truly, I implore, is there balm in Gilead? Tell me, I implore. Quoth the raven, nevermore. Prophet, said I, thing of evil, prophet still, if bird or devil, by that heaven that binds above us, by that God we both adore, tell this soul with sorrow laden, if, with the distant Aidenn, it shall clasp a sainted maiden whom the angels name Lenore. Clasp a rare and radiant maiden whom the angels named Lenore. Quoth the raven, nevermore. Be that word our sign of parting, bird or fiend, I shrieked upstarting, get thee back into the tempest and the night's Plutonian shore. Leave no black plume as a token of that lie thy soul hath spoken. Leave my loneliness unbroken, quit the bust above my door, take thy beak from out my heart, and take thy form from off my door. Quoth the raven, nevermore. And the raven, never flitting, still is sitting on that pallid bust of Pallas just above my chamber door, and his eyes have all the seeming of a demon's that is dreaming, and the lamplight o'er him streaming throws his shadow on the floor, and my soul from out that shadow that lies floating on the floor shall be lifted never more. This is quite a powerful poem, both in terms of how Poe composes its wording, its language, its use of rhyme and repetition. The repetition, repeating the word nevermore, it kind of reinforces it, it echoes it within us, it becomes an inevitability. But also the content of it. And this idea of a man who is mourning the loss of his love, Lenore. He seems to be a young scholar, indicated by the bust of Pallas with his books, his learning, his references to classical culture. He's mourning the loss of his love, and then this raven, he first imagines that Lenore might be at the door when he hears some tapping. He's obviously hoping that she would be there. Then this raven flies in and starts croaking, nevermore, nevermore. Obviously, like a bit like a parrot, right? Now we know from mythology that the raven is a deeply symbolic figure or bird. In Norse mythology, it's tied to the god Odin, who had two ravens. Let me double check their precise names. Hugin and Munin. And I believe that these stand for mind and will, or memory and will, potentially as well. So they are kind of Odin's memory and will going out from himself. And they are often heralds of death, not only being carrion, crows which eat, ravens which eat the dead. This is famously put into song in the folk song The Twa Corbies, the two crows who are watching and looking out for the next meal, and they find a dying knight and start pecking away at him. But also with a reference to Odin, oftentimes when a great hero was fated to die or was to be called to Valhalla, you might see one of these ravens, Hugin or Munin, as the representatives of Odin, marking his presence and that he had called that great brave warrior to Valhalla, to the afterlife. There's a sense in which they are an ill omen or a portent of an inevitable fate that cannot be avoided. These creatures of death, and of course their blackness is tied to the melancholic disposition. And so this raven starts croaking nevermore, and our character, somewhat out of jollity, but also as a way of kind of coping with his grief, starts asking questions. Let's see these questions. So the first one: will he have respite from the memories of Lenore? Will he ever be freed from the pain of remembering the woman he loved, who has now died? Quoth the raven, nevermore. Those memories cannot be fully expunged. That pain will always be there that comes with those memories. Okay, so that, that's a normal question, and it's a hard experience to carry that sense of loss, especially for one who's so fully in love with another. But this is something we can maybe handle, something we can deal with. But then we move on. Prophet, said I, thing of evil, prophet still, if bird or devil. So he's now accepting, this creature. He's imbuing it with a sort of supernatural power. In some sense, he's seeing it as it's almost like the volupsa or the Norn or the Fate, questioning a creature who knows the deep truths of the world. And of course, I've mentioned the supernatural connections with Odin, the god who gave up his eye for wisdom and knowledge. So these birds also have that kind of seeing knowledge. But more than that, the bird, if you think about it, they see from on high, so they can see the whole course of a life and things from a perspective beyond our own tiny linear kind of on the ground perspective. But they also are natural. They're part of nature, and nature seems to have its own ways and be more fully tuned into the stark realities of the world in a way that humans can often delude ourselves. So I guess there's a sense in which nature is true. It doesn't lie. It cannot lie. Only man and woman can lie. And so he asks this thing, whether it be natural, supernatural. Tell him the truth. First, can I escape the memories of Lenore? No. Second, is there balm in Gilead? So will there be rest in the afterlife? I guess is the idea here. Or let us look up Gilead is the word. Certainly a Gilead in the Bible. So it's kind of the region which is near the Jordan River. So I guess this is the promised land from the scriptures. Also a reference to that. So is there balm in the promised land? Is there balm in the afterlife? Will I have peace from my memories of Lenore there? The bird says no. Nevermore. So even in the afterlife, these memories are going to haunt him. So there's no escape from this fate in life or death. Finally, okay, maybe we can't escape the memories of loss in this life. Maybe there's no rest in the afterlife. But will I get to hold her in my arms one more time in the afterlife? Even if we're in torment from it, even if the flames of hell are burning against us, like we see in Dante's Inferno, a young couple who, because they had an affair, they were not married, are condemned to hell. They're burning in the flames, but they're clasping each other. Their love holds each other together. Will it be like that? I'm actually going to try and find that image because it's such a beautiful one. While I do that, the answer to the question is, of course, no. You will not hold her anymore. Now, this is quite a stark stark comment here by the raven, and it could be taken in several ways. Perhaps if there is an afterlife, there is no, like, you're not going to meet each other. Perhaps that's part of it, or it's not going to be the way that you expect. You're going to be like a wretch, a haunted creature who has no source of life in the way that he's expecting, this kind of beautiful paradisical heaven, maybe like Dante's main character finding Beatrice. No, there is nothing like that in the afterlife. Or perhaps there is no afterlife, and she is gone forever, and there is no point in holding on to this promise that maybe one day we'll see her again. No, that's not going to happen. Actually, she's gone for good, and you've got to deal with that pain for the rest of your life. That would be a really hard lesson, right? But it terrifies the man. He holds some hope that his mourning will find resolution in when he clasps her one more time to him in the afterlife. And the bird says no, nevermore. It's not just no, it's nevermore. There's a finality to that, and a stark truth. And so he tells the raven to leave. It's like, okay, you're going to say all these terrible things to me, but let me, okay, but and that may be true, but maybe I can dismiss you. Maybe you can be gone from my mind. Maybe you can be silenced, and those horrible thoughts, even if they're true, don't need to confront me every day. The raven says, nevermore. The raven's actually going to dwell there. And there's this key line here: take thy beak from out my heart, and take thy form from off my door. The final verse seems to kind of reinforce this. His eyes have all the seeming of a demon's that is dreaming. The lamplight o'er him streaming throws his shadow on the floor. And my soul from out that shadow that lies floating on the floor shall be lifted nevermore. The raven here isn't just a bird. He or she is a kind of symbol for that doubt, those gnawing thoughts which afflict us, and particularly in the melancholic grief that this young man has for the death of this beautiful woman he loved. But I think more broadly, the raven is that nagging voice which, when we believe in a delusion, or we're trying to cope with our emotions, and we start to rationalize it in certain ways, imagine a certain thing to be true, even though there's no basis in reality. The raven is that voice within us which says nevermore, or no, that is not right, and causes us deep insecurity and challenges all our fakery, all our coping, all our delusions, and strips them away. It is the voice of death within us, as it were, the death of all of those idols and fantasies we create. It is is there any other way to put it? It is and to some extent this kind of voice, we work hard to deny it. I mean, someone like Nietzsche would say that the whole creation of heroic stories, like the hero's journey story, I mean, he would call them Apollinian stories, where a hero overcomes tragedy. He triumphs over evil and suffering and death through his efforts. This is a cope. This is a way of us coping and pretending that we can master the horrors of this world. It's a way of soothing the deep despair we might feel if we gave in to the truth that there is no ultimate victory, that in the final analysis, as try as we might, we are overcome by death. And so rather than accepting that truth and using it to build us into something greater, the Apollinian denies it. And there's a sense in which the raven is that voice of the Dionysian spirit, or the death impulse, and says, no, there isn't an Apollinian victory here. You're not going to get the gnaw back. And you're not going to be free of the memory either. You're going to be tormented forever. And I'm going to make sure you remember that. It's a really great poem. It's a great poem, and I feel like Poe really captures that sense of longing, and then that really sharp undercurrent which of in our minds, which really knocks out those delusions we might have. I can't say I relate to this, like having this experience of grief in this way, but I would say that maybe as a young man, many of us can trick ourselves into thinking that, oh, I fancy this woman and I really like her, I have a crush on her, and I'm unsure if she likes me, but there's this, and this, which point towards why she does like me, and so we'll carry on trying to pursue her. But deep down, you can tell through subtle movements, through words she said, through her lack of engagement in ways you would expect, that she doesn't really like you in that way. But the but there's it's easy to kind of make out more of the other stuff and put that to the side, put it to away. Oh, it didn't really happen. Oh, that's not really part of it. That's just we can excuse that. Maybe I've misunderstood that. Those doubts that we have in those situations are like the Raven here, and Poe just captures it so beautifully. So that is the Raven. Now Poe's second text that I've included in the Corncrake is the Philosophy of Composition, which he goes on to use the Raven as the basis for his kind of explanation of how he composes a work. Now, this is it's not super long, but I think it's a wee bit long to read here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to read my foreword to these two pieces. It's not super long, but it gives us a little bit of an insight into his philosophy of composition, which I think is quite striking. And it means that we can get into the Corncrake proper here. So here's the beginning of the Raven, and we've got this lovely illustration of Edgar Allan Poe here by Gustave Doré, which those illustrations were from. And I'm going to read from this bit here. Let's zoom in a bit. There we go. And I'll stop to maybe comment on a few things. In the 19th century, many artists of great genius presented themselves as nothing short than mystics. They suggested that their works of poetry, painting, and theatre were the results of spontaneous inspiration, of something below consciousness erupting like a thunderbolt, they mere vessels of a deeper magic that pervades reality. So Samuel T. Coleridge claimed that his great poem Kubla Khan came to him in an opium-induced dream, within which hundreds of lines of poetry seared into his soul. When he awoke, he penned these verses as they were clear to him in his mind. Likewise, Richard Wagner claimed that the music of Tristan and Isolde surged into his thoughts. He took hold of these unprompted melodic and harmonic conceptions that came unbidden and tirelessly set them to paper. In an ecstatic frenzy, he conveyed the music flowing through his mind into a written composition, regardless of whether it defied rule or convention. He was a vessel, an instrument played by the will of the world, which lies beyond mere appearance and fancy. Let's just stop there for a moment. These ideas, I've mentioned them in a 19th century context, go way back. The ancient classical writer Longius, he famously argued that poetic inspiration is like a divine frenzy. It is ecstatic, it's beyond the rational, and it seems to come down into a person and infuse them with something called the sublime. And this beautiful writing then pours forth from them. In a way, to have control of the process is to be, in some ways, hampering the ability to access the sublime. It's beyond reason. It's beyond control. It's something else which is kind of working through the muses, working through the poet, the divine muses. And this idea, both in pagan, classical pagan, and Christian thought, that a person's words might not be their own, their thoughts might be planted in them by another agent, is a strong one in a lot of traditions. Think, for example, of in the Book of Acts, where the Holy Spirit descends upon the disciples, and They rush out of their rooms and start speaking in languages they don't know themselves, proclaiming the good news that Jesus Christ is risen from the dead. This is like what might be called extempore. It's the Spirit which is kind of using these people as a vessel for communicating. In a way, what they're contributing is their voice box and their mouths and their ability to express the words the Spirit has planted within them. They're not able to conceive of it themselves. Many writers in the 19th century take on this sort of idea, perhaps tied in with the renewed emphasis upon feeling within the Romantic era, as opposed to reason as being the source of truth, that one can access the truth about the world through our emotions, our affections, rather than by rational thought. And that actually rational thought deals with the world as it appears to us, but actually there are things that are deeper and lie beyond the world of appearance. Indeed, the world of appearance, for someone like Wagner, at least the later Wagner, is illusory and doesn't reflect the true nature or the deeper nature of reality. And so the hymn, tapping into those unprompted feelings, those dreams, visions, emotions, is more in tune with what is fundamental than thinking, than thought. And so this is quite a powerful idea in this period, and it kind of imbues the artworks that are produced by them with a sense that they're not just entertaining, but they provide deep insight and are great expressions of things as they are. This, I think, is gives the poet and the composer and the writer a sense of mystique, that it elevates their positions, because they are now like the new prophets in the world. Before, you had the prophet like Moses, who receives his words from God. You had Peter, who was inspired by the Holy Spirit. But now, in the age of machines, the true vehicle for the divine word, whether it's the Christian God or nature or the will underneath the world, as Schopenhauer and Wagner would kind of suggest, they become the instrument by which that speaks into life. And it breaks out of the kind of orderly, mechanical, mathematical, rational world and disrupts it through this act of creation. It's quite a charming idea. I don't mean that in a quaint sense. I mean, it's charming in that there's something very desirable about appearing in that way, and for us to certainly, how would you put it, reify someone like Wagner as, you know, he was a very talented man, far more talented than most people have ever been, and he was certainly exceptional in his ability to write opera and to combine serious philosophical thought, folk tales which he had thoroughly researched, and the most brilliant musical compositions. He was an amazing thinker and writer and author and composer. But people kind of want to go further and say this inspiration, this genius that he had, wasn't just a product of himself, but actually he was the receptacle. He was the kind of mediator between something more than him, something which connects us beyond Wagner into the world itself. And as I mentioned, Coleridge also took this line with Kubla Khan. But Poe is very anti this approach. He doesn't think, I think firstly, he doesn't think that this is really how writing works. And secondly, I think he would doubt the possibility of it even being how writing works. He thinks that his approach that he outlined in this essay is much more effective. Such romantic and quasi-religious notions of the artist contrast strongly with the literary theories of Edgar Allan Poe. One of America's most original and elevated writers, Poe's essay, The Philosophy of Composition, published in 1846. So, this is around the time that people like Wagner and Coleridge are working. Presents a very different descriptive and prescriptive model for art. That's what I was trying to indicate in a very poor way, that he's both saying that his method is more accurate to the artist's experience, and it is better for the artist to fully embrace this rather than pretend there's some sort of genius receiving from the gods the truth or their poetry, and thus they will write better poetry. Poe contends that art, at least in a literary sense, is mathematical in nature. The writer does not derive his poetry and prose from dreams and callings of the subconscious, at least not wholesale. Writing is a process wherein content and form are considered, refined, pruned, and amended in rational and logical ways. The writer drafts, redrafts, considers, reconsiders. There is a fine-tuning sequence that underpins most poetry, and artists pretend otherwise to maintain their aura of mystique. Using his seminal poem The Raven, to which I was reading earlier, to illustrate his method, Poe outlines principles that underpin high-quality art. An artist should first conceive of the ending of the piece. This is the moment of consequence, where all the action has been leading. By prioritizing the end, Poe can craft a narrative that logically leads to and builds up towards a powerful conclusion. In so doing, it will be able to create novel and vivid effect, the aim of the artwork. The goal of the artist is to evoke an impression or emotional response, and this dictates all aspects of the work, such as its tone, characters, theme, setting, and so on. This is a challenging idea. The purpose of the artwork is not its story, no matter how interesting the ideas and plot, nor is it the message or political point being made. It is an effect, single and immediate, stirred up in the reader. Just to kind of echo this point a little more, Poe talks about how, in his view, the purpose of an artwork, or at least a poem or a story, is to create a specific effect, an impression upon the reader. And it's supposed to evoke a certain emotion, and that is singular. And so this is the unity of effect for Poe. And this defines the whole work. This is what the work is supposed to produce. If it fails to produce an effect or a certain emotion, an intended emotion, it has failed in its quest as a work of art. This then leads him to the next logical step, which is, okay, I know what effect I want to make. The key to making that effect is the conclusion, the climax of the story. The ending of the story is what is going to leave the reader with a certain emotional effect. And so I need to know what I'm going to do for that first. Then I can work backwards from there, and I can work out how I will build up to that point. I can work out what language and characters and form and composition is most suited to arriving at this ending to produce this effect. So as you can see, it's quite a logical way of thinking about it. And in the essay itself, he goes into great detail showing how this applies in The Raven. It's quite an interesting set of ideas, because I think intuitively many of us who have tried writing understand this idea that there is a certain kind of concept or notion which captures our imagination, particularly because it has a certain feeling associated with it. And so then the story that we write is a kind of elaboration out from that. And if we want to do a good job of it, we consider the rest of the story in relation to how well it will build up to the climax and produce the effect that captured us in the first place. I think it's probably useful advice for many of us, because again, the point here is the effect is total. Everything is in service to the effect. So my political point of view I may well believe in it, but the story is not going to work well. It's not going to achieve its aim in producing that emotional response unless, well, if I'm also using it as a vehicle to promote my political ideas, if I'm trying to convince you of a certain position, it's actually then trying to serve two purposes. So Poe would say, no, that's bad writing. And I think that's why often many of us are put off by that, or it turns us off from the story, because you're no longer responding to a story and trying to, and it's trying to work up a certain emotion in you. You're now just being lectured to about it, and you lose all connection with that narrative. Another example might be the plot. I think many writers, and I'm probably guilty of this, get carried away with trying to think too hard about first what makes a good story. We're not thinking about the effect it has on the reader. We're thinking, okay, this is the story I want to build, and I want to build this world around it. I want to go into all these details. I want people to know this, 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 and this. I want to go off on this side quest. I want to go on this tangent, etc., etc. For Poe, this is bad writing. The story is secondary to the effect it produces in the reader, in the listener. So you shouldn't be focusing on what makes the greatest story, or on making sure that you incorporate all the elements and ideas that you want to explore. You should rather be thinking, how does this serve the stirring up of an emotion, singular, unique emotion in my reader? Because that might mean you have to cut some of your story. You might have to change significant aspects of it to arrive at that emotional response. It's a kind of interesting thing, because it's really acknowledging that stories don't exist in a vacuum, and they're not just for the writer. Actually, they're for the reader, and the reader has to kind of be factored into how you're writing, what kind of effect you want to leave on them. It's not just about writing a quality story, it's about the effect you want your story to have. That's more important. I mean, I mentioned in the last stream a bit about this, and I'd recommend people go there, because there's a bit more that Poe talks about that I mentioned there. I think, though, one of the ideas that I think is worth saying is that I think this ties in with what other authors and writers and artists have said in the past, that while a story might not elicit the exact same feeling in every single reader that comes across it, it will at the very least produce a cluster of feelings with greater or lesser depth, depending on the person, which belong to a certain family. And so we can share an experience of fear or terror or horror or disgust or joy, broadly speaking, in response to certain stories, right? I think that's a fair comment. How life-changing these things are, I don't know. I don't think Poe, in this essay at least, doesn't seem to suggest they should be, whereas I think other authors want you to read their work and come away transformed in some way, even if in a little bit. Whereas I don't think Poe has that attitude at all. I think he just wants you to have an experience of something, which could be quite profound in itself and moving and cause for contemplation, but it's not going to fundamentally alter your being, I think. Let us move to the final paragraph here. Poe details the logical steps he took in writing The Raven, starting from the effect he wanted to create and moving through how that led him to construct the poem's constituent parts in a series of rationally considered stages. So just what we've been describing already. Some critics, like T.S. Eliot, dispute Poe's notion that he wrote the poem in this way, while others are thoroughly convinced that he did. I mean, this is interesting, because I think Eliot was really saying that even the evidence from the Raven itself points towards a place where, yes, there is rational deliberation on certain words and stanza construction and so on, but there is a place for an imaginative element that's free from just pure logic, that actually the idea of the Raven standing over him, over the character, while he mourns his love and basically breaking open his delusions. This kind of concept seems like an idea which didn't just come from thinking about what would present melancholy the best. This has a degree of imagination and an idea that's come to him that he hasn't kind of prepared in advance. And so it has a sort of inspirational quality, which maybe Poe's not recognizing. Nonetheless, others do say that he did do that, like he did follow this process. I guess we will never know. What matters here is the challenge he lays down to the potential author or writer. Whether or not a great work of art can come to us wholesale in a dreamlike trance, or by a dramatic flash of divine inspiration, even these will require cogent thought and logical consideration to put into a medium by which others can enjoy it. The process of translation from thought to page needs the writer to weigh up how best to convey the impression they imagine. It thereby requires a disciplined, original, and intelligent mind to take, even by intuition, a spontaneous notion and convert it into poetry or prose. And I think the example of Wagner here is quite instructive. I mentioned that Wagner claimed that the music of Tristan and Isolde came to him. It was in his mind. It burst forth. And this was, for him, a great moment of confirmation, I suppose, that music, the melodies, the harmonies, they seem to represent or come forth from a way of, beyond the world of appearance. It's a kind of manifestation of the will of the world, that one reality which we apprehend as many beings. He so let's say he has this music and it's come to him, these melodies, and he wants to write them down. It's only because he has great training, experience, and expertise in classical and romantic composition, that he's had years of writing opera, that he is a man capable of writing a piece like Tristan and Isolde that bends and breaks so many of the rules. He can only do so precisely because he understands how to write according to the old rules and how to use these sounds and to make them into something new, to make his own melodies, which are still beautiful but not conforming to what has gone before. I could say these ideas came to me, that I imagined Tristan and Isolde, which is, I think it's impossible because I haven't got that kind of deep set of compositional priors and musical priors within me that could give rise to such a thing. But let's say I did. I wouldn't know where to start in writing it down. I could maybe hum a few lines for somebody else to put into notation, but I don't know how to do that. I don't have the knowledge and ability to write that out. It's only because Wagner had that preset of learning, in many ways with both the constituent parts and the rules, that he was then capable of taking that inspired music that had just come to him, like a rapture, and put it to page in a way that it could be then played in real life. I think that's a really important point. The rational deliberation, or the rational tools of the mind, need to be harnessed. Or let me put it another way: the inspirations that we have, we can only harness when we use our rational tools. That's what Wagner did, and Poe did, and I would argue Coleridge and Eliot and every other artist of great report and repute. So while we may want to open ourselves up to other realities, whether be God, nature, archetypes, egregores, whatever name you want to use. You want to open yourself up to other realities. You still need that logical, rational part of your brain to take hold of that and shape it into something which can then be spoken or sung or performed. It's not enough just to have the moment of inspiration. It needs expression. So I thought this was interesting because it goes against a lot of the grain when it comes to writing, at least with some of the great artists that many of us like to revere and praise. It pushes against this sort of divine inspiration notion that we often find, or at least it tempers it and says, no, you can actually develop as a good writer, because it's not just down to you being a receiver of prophetic wisdom, but actually you can enhance your ability to write logically. And by that, he doesn't just mean in terms of a plot, he means in terms of making everything serve the desired end, which is the effect upon the reader. The effect upon the reader. I'll finish with one final point on this then. So I've been saying that the effect upon the reader is the key idea for Poe, that there is some strength to this, that actually a lot of the time there's a danger of overindulging ourselves as writers or as artists when we only think of making the best artwork rather than trying to recognize that the artwork is meant to stir something up, both cognitively in terms of what we see or what we hear, and emotionally. That's the only way it really exists. It doesn't exist outside of those experiences of it. But there is something to say, well, actually, a work of art is more than just how people respond to it, and that it can have an inner beauty and majesty and magnificence, even if nobody appreciates it. And that actually to truly appreciate something is to see it as distant from ourselves, is not defined by us. And so rather than kind of assuming its value comes in its use for us in inducing a certain emotion, we can actually appreciate it on its own terms. I think this is true certainly for visual art, something like a statue or a painting. Its value doesn't necessarily derive from how I feel in response to it. Indeed, to treat it as a kind of mere instrument of how I should feel in a certain context seems almost blasphemous. Rather, it's much more that if I come to that work of art totally open with no desire to use it or utilize it in some way for my own end, and just acknowledge it, observe it, have kind of get to know it and appreciate it as something different from me, as other from me, as disconnected from my desires and wants and needs, then I can come to truly love it and enjoy it. I'm not sure if writing can have the same ability. Certainly not a novel, a story, which very much works more with drawing you in and wanting you to feel. You can't just you can't just stand back and appreciate a novel in the same way you can a painting. There's an intensity to it because you are active. You are not just separate from it. You have to read the words. Maybe you hear them in your inner monologue. Maybe you picture scenes in your mind and you feel in response to the events that are coming up. Very different from a static painting you see rather than imagine. I guess you're bringing the imagination here. And so that changes the relationship. So maybe Poe's more right on that. Poetry, lyrics, we can maybe stand apart from, and we can appreciate all these things as coming from other minds too, right? The Raven was not something I invented; it was Edgar Allan Poe, so I can appreciate it as for what he thought and how he can put this together and the feelings he felt when he wrote it and what he wants me to feel. But it's harder to kind of stand back from it when I'm reading it rather than hearing or listening, listening or seeing or even touching, because I'm active and it's in its creation this time. I'm the one imagining it. So these are just some thoughts on Edgar Allan Poe's work, his ideas on the philosophy of composition, and a reading of The Raven. Now, my voice is going, I'm afraid, so I'm not going to be able to read the second one. Maybe I will read another Edgar Allan Poe story on another Corncrake stream. It's been really good fun, and I hope that you have found some value in my exploration of Edgar Allan Poe. I would encourage you to go and read more of him and other great work in the Corncrake Magazine this month. It's already up. It's up a day early just for the people who watch this stream. Go to corncrakemag.com. You'll be able to read it there. Otherwise, thank you for your time, everybody. I hope that you have a good rest of your Sunday, and I look forward to catching you again. Till next time, God bless everyone. Bye for now.